We are challenging this idea that you are only important in the political system based on your ability to vote. This election is tough for all of us, but voting is only the first step in building long-term power. Voting on its own is not going to get us the change that we seek. To combat the rise of white supremacy and white nationalism and fascism, we need people to not just see our communities as votes and poll numbers. And here in Milwaukee, we roll up our sleeves and organize 365 days a year, including the day after the election. Our model doesn't leave anyone behind. We've always approached this election cycle as a tool to get people engaged in the long term. At Block, we start our conversations by asking our folks, what does it look like for the Black community to thrive? And we fully plan to do everything that we can to make our visions for a thriving community a reality for November and beyond.
In 1964, at this same event, Fannie Lou Hamer explained to us the voter suppression that Black voters in Mississippi were facing. And in doing so, she asked the question, is this America? And yet here we are, 56 years later, and we're facing some of the same forms of voter suppression with a few other things thrown up in the mix. We're looking at closing of polling places. We're looking at millions of voters being purged from lists. We're looking at photo ID. And we're still looking at the oldest form of voter suppression, felony disenfranchisement. Now, as of late, we're also looking at vote by mail attacks. And so some of this suppression is deeply rooted in the South. Not all, because I'm always reminded what Brother Malcolm told us, when you south of the Canadian border, you're in the South, right? And so we have to put the blame for that on the folks that are doing the suppression. And yet we still have to accept some level of enabling that has been done by the progressive movement and by this party, because we ceded over the South. We gave up on the South. And in doing so, we allowed the South, we allowed some states, we allowed some counties and our people, we allowed it to become a laboratory, a petri dish, where some of the worst forms of voter suppression were bred and developed, and then became like viruses unleashed around the rest of the country. But I have some good news. In spite of all of that, we have power. And Black voters have been showing this power. We've been showing it in the streets, and we've been showing it at the polling places. In the streets, we've been showing it over the past few months where our movement, our protests, our people have forced cities to consider policies and to consider action that just 3 months ago wouldn't have been unthinkable. And while we're on the topic, today would be a very good day to arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor. We're also demonstrating this power at the polling places. Just weeks ago in Tennessee, Black voters came out in huge numbers and helped a little-known sister named Marquita Bradshaw to win the Senate primary, going up against a candidate that had the full backing of the Democratic establishment. That's power. And in Missouri, a state that's usually thought of as a red state, voters came out and voted for Medicaid expansion. But you can't understand that vote. You can't understand that victory for Medicaid expansion if you don't understand that Black voters came out and were energized by the congressional race of Cori Bush. You can't understand that victory if you don't understand Kim Gardner's campaign, a progressive prosecutor. You can't understand what happened in Missouri if you don't understand the amazing work of the amazing Kayla, Kayla Reed and Action St. Louis, and the work that they did to close the jail known as the Workhouse. And so the lesson of the story is this, that when we center Black folks, when we center Black issues, everybody wins. The entire progressive agenda moves forward. And this is not a new lesson. This is a lesson that we have learned, that we have seen all throughout this country history. When you center those that have been catching hell since 1619, this entire country moves closer and closer to what it's always pretended it was. And so with that, the lesson is, the question is, what is the Black agenda? And the good news is this, that there's no one answer to that question. There doesn't have to be just one answer to that question. We've got a couple of great examples. Black Futures Lab has given us the Black Agenda 2020. Movement for Black Lives back in 2016 developed a vision for Black Lives, and we're going to see 2.0 of that as part of the Black National Convention that's going to be taking place in August 28th. See blacknovember.org. And part of that agenda, part of that platform includes the Breathe Act, which deals with which deals with policing and police violence, and which has amazing sponsors like Ayanna Pressley and Rashida Tlaib. Black voters want to see the Breathe Act passed. Black voters want to see this party accepted as part of its platform and to see it passed in Congress. The coronavirus has also highlighted some other parts of the Black agenda because it's highlighted not just the health issues and the need for healthcare, government-funded healthcare, but not just that, it's exposed the issues of entrepreneurship and employment and issues of wages and issues of food justice and issues of education and so on and so forth. These are the things that Black voters want to see. Not just in the policies that they're demanding, but also they're democratic in terms of the way that these policies have been created. They've been created by a process, a community process that has been come from the community. And that's what democracy looks like. And so what we're challenging Joe Biden on is for him and the party to be different, to be better, not just in the policies that they're fighting for in regards to racial justice, but even in the ways that they engage with our community. And because what we're trying to defeat isn't just Trump, we're trying to defeat Trumpism. And not just in this election, but beyond November, right? We're not just trying to defeat white supremacy in the White House, we're trying to defeat white supremacy up and down the ballot and in every segment of society. That's what we're trying to do. And this is what I know. At the end of the day, we are going to win this battle because I know that when we work together, we win. And that's what our history shows us. And we've come too far. We fought too much to lose to the likes of Donald Trump. We stand on some mighty shoulders. We stand on shoulders from Frederick and Harriet to Queen Mother and Marcus Garvey to Stokely and John Lewis and Ella Baker, who told us that we who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. And so for the next 76 days, we may not get enough rest. But this is, I know, at the end of the day, everybody's going to know that Black voters matter. 365. Can't stop, won't stop.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carlos Garcia, and I'm really excited and honored to be here with you today on behalf of Mi Gente. For those of you all who don't know Mi Gente, my peoples, yeah, it's with a J. It's not misspelled. The J is for justice. We are a political home for Latinx and Chicanx people who seek racial, economic, gender, and climate justice. I'm joining you today from Acamil Otam, Hohokam, and Otam land, known as Phoenix, Arizona. I'm speaking from the place where in 2016, we won the 10-year battle against Sheriff Arpaio's white supremacy, only to have that same evil nationalized in the form of the Trump presidency. But it is those fights that have made Arizona one of the most fierce and resilient communities. The state of Arizona is in play not because of chance. Let me say that again, not because of chance. It's because of the struggle and hard work of many. We have learned that winning and surviving means taking risks and not holding back, by punching up and not compromising our values. It takes a single undocumented mother raising her son in one of the most anti-immigrant states of our country, like my own mother. It's having people whose families have been deported by elected officials knocking on doors to vote those politicians out. It means young people protesting to get police out of their schools for years and finally succeeding. Those on the right hold back no punches when they're spewing hate and turning it into policy. Those in the center are comfortable. They wish to maintain the status quo. But if we have learned anything from 2020, this pandemic, and Trump, it is that remaining in the center or on the sidelines is not an option. People's lives have been and continue to be at stake. And with Trump in office, it can get worse. This November, we are going to fight like hell to say fuera Trump, to evict him from the White House, not because Vice President Biden and Senator Harris are our saviors, but because we are choosing our adversary. It's been clear from the beginning that there will be disagreements with the Biden and Harris team. We can't and won't shy away from that. For example, in how to get justice for immigrant communities. I was happy to see that Biden committed to ending the infamous Operation Streamline, a practice that criminalizes and jails hundreds of migrants in trials that last a couple of minutes and are barely, if at all, constitutional. But this isn't enough. We're going to have to push Biden and Harris administration to end all deportations. But I'd much rather design and execute beautiful campaigns like the Not One More campaign in the past, and struggle to try and tap into the Jamaican and Desi soul of Kamala than to continue and allow our communities to be torn apart by re-electing the bigots in the White House now. Moving forward, whether it's with Mi Gente, the Working Families Party, and all the amazing organizations joining us tonight, or for myself in the Phoenix City Council, giving up is not an option. The arc will bend towards justice, but we can't afford to let it happen on a timetable that's comfortable for those not impacted. We need to fight and stand with our truth and continue to be ready to grind. Before I end, I want to shout out those running for local office. It's not easy. It's sometimes lonely, it's depressing, but I've personally chosen a political path not as a simple career change, but as a movement strategy to show that we in elected office can run unapologetic campaigns, win righteous policy, and inspire others to do the same. There are candidates running these types of campaigns everywhere. So join us this November to support unapologetic, inspiring, true to the people candidates who exist up and down the ballot, while at the same time, we rejoice the eviction of the racists that we have in the White House now. Let's keep putting people first and work hard to better the quality of life for the next 7 generations to come. Thank you all. Y a darle duro.
I love what Carlos just said about us being in a position to have to choose our adversaries. That's what this presidential election is like at this stage. And I want to say that here at rootsaction.org, we've been very lucky to work together with Our Revolution and Progressive Democrats of America sponsoring the Bernie Delegates Network. And we've been amplifying the voices of hundreds and hundreds of Bernie delegates in recent weeks. And among them is the Nevada delegation, which instituted a wonderful national campaign to say that unless the platform includes Medicare for all, the appropriate step on the voting by delegates is to vote no. And more than 850 delegates at this point have signed a pledge and presumably went ahead and voted no on the platform because it lacks Medicare for all. And a special shout out of appreciation to Congressman Ro Khanna, who very early on declared that he too, despite pressure, would vote no on the platform because it fails to include Medicare for all, which we know is the way to institute Medicare for all, but also in reality, healthcare is a human right instead of just as rhetoric. Now, rootsaction.org has launched votetrumpOut.org, a campaign that is completely focused on the swing states, communicating with progressives. And frankly, many of them are telling us that they don't know if they want to vote for Joe Biden. But we're telling progressives in swing states that at Roots Action, we also have a lot of basic criticisms of Joe Biden's record. But it's essential. It is absolutely essential to vote Trump out. So I want to conclude by saying that we intend, along with many other organizations and many activists, we intend to work across the board in this country from day one after a Biden administration begins to challenge Biden, to challenge the oligarchy, to challenge the military-industrial complex, to challenge institutional racism, to challenge corporate power. That's the second part of our task. But first, we've got to defeat Donald Trump in swing states. That's our moral responsibility.
Thank you all so much for sharing with us today. Muchísimas gracias. To those of you who are with us online today, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and we need you. We will only succeed in our plan to defeat Trump and build governing power with your help. Los necesitamos en nuestro movimiento. So please go to www.unitedagainsttrump.org right now to sign up to volunteer with us and to donate so we can have the resources necessary to defeat Trump.
Thank you so much to that incredible panel. I think what all of us got from that is a real understanding that the pathway to not just defeating Donald Trump, but to decimating him in November goes straight through the voter engagement and the participation of Black and Brown communities all across the country. You know, I want to share just something really quickly as I get ready to introduce our next panel, which is this. In 2016, the candidate I so much to that incredible panel. I think what all of us got from that is a real understanding that the pathway to necessary folks commute. The candidate that I supported in the primary did not win. And so I voted for that candidate in the general election, but I didn't do what I've done in every other election. I didn't make hundreds of calls, knock hundreds of doors, work everything I had to win. And, you know, I have thought many times over the years about what would have happened if I was fighting for Medicare for all under a Clinton administration instead of fighting to just save the basic tenements of the ACA under President Trump. If we were fighting for real transformation of our immigration system into a humanitarian system instead of fighting to simply just keep children with their families at the border. I have thought about those differences often, and they are informing how I'm moving right now in 2020. And I want to introduce Heather Booth, who has spent the last 50 years fighting for racial and economic justice, who was a part of the original Freedom Rides, who helped to run the NAACP Youth Engagement Voter Fund, who has spent literally her entire adult life fighting for justice. Heather, I want to bring you into this conversation because what I know is that it will not be, right, folks who voted for Trump in 2016 and that now vote for him in 2020, Biden in 2020, that is going to be the linchpin for this election. It will be Black and Brown voters in these communities who will fight voter suppression, who will overcome odds outside of what any of us can imagine at record numbers that will help us defeat Trump. And you are helping us get there. You are helping progressives understand what's at stake. So tell us, how can progressives be in this moment, show up in this moment?
Well, Jennifer, I'm so grateful for that introduction. I'm so grateful to be your sister in the movement, and I thank all of you for the leadership and organizing and massive energy of the resistance that you are moving for racial and economic and social and climate justice, and that you're moving that into voter turnout against Trump, and as Cliff said, Trumpism. And that means being for the Biden-Harris ticket. Like many of you, I've spent my whole life in the movement for social, racial, economic, and other justice and democracy. This picture behind me, I'm 18 years old in Rollville, Mississippi, and that's at Fannie Lou Hamer's home. And I've continued that struggle just as you have. We know that when we organize, The power of the people can sweep Trump from office and elect Joe Biden the next president of the United States and Kamala Harris as vice president. And then we need to keep organizing. Now, the opposition will do everything they can to suppress our votes. It's the only way they can win. But our answer might be captured in an anthem of the South African freedom fighters during apartheid. The higher they build the obstacles, the taller we will grow. We'll do everything in our power to tear down those obstacles. And where they are, we will overcome them as long as we organize with the power of the people. If they tell lies, we speak truth. If they slow the mails, we cast our ballots early. If they limit the early polling places, we'll seek them out. If they limit the number of voting machines,
Izzy's got the same issue.
I can't hear anybody.
Izzy said he couldn't, now he can.
Hi, everyone. My apologies. My name is Andrea Naya, and I am a member of United We Dream Action. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and here to stay. I migrated to the U.S. from El Salvador at the age of 5. My mother and I settled in Maryland with my family. When Trump first announced he would end up back in 2017, I was only 1 month away from turning the age of eligibility. 1 month from being protected from deportation. In June, I had another chance when the Supreme Court ruled against Trump. I was excited about the possibility of getting DACA and to be able to start college with peace of mind. But Trump went after DACA again with the new memo that undermines the Supreme Court decision and keeps me without deportation protection. For immigrants like me, this election is the fight of our lives. We cannot have another 4 years of Trump's hateful, racist immigration agenda. We're fighting for a future where all immigrants can live healthy and fulfilling lives, where no one has to fear deportation, detention, family separation, or dying in a cage. Now, I'm proud to introduce our last speaker. I want to congratulate Congresswoman Omar on her decisive victory in her first re-election campaign. Congresswoman Omar has been a steadfast progressive champion for immigrants in her time in Congress. She has worked side by side with the immigrant youth to fight back against the racist attacks from the Trump administration, calling for protection for undocumented people and calling to defund ICE and CBP. United We Dream Action is proud to have endorsed Congresswoman Omar and is excited about her continued commitment to our Free to Stay, Free to Move platform. All the progressive organizations on this call will continue to organize and mobilize voters to send pro-immigrant champions like Congresswoman Omar back to Congress. We're going to mobilize voters to defeat Trump so that we can deliver a better future for every single person in this country. Now let's welcome the Congresswoman from the 5th District of Minnesota, Ilhan Omar.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me. This is Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to join you from Minnesota's 5th Congressional District, where it is home to organizers, fighters, pace setters, trailblazers, people who know not only how to mobilize and elect history makers, but people who know how to really fight back and organize for policies that make our lives better. When $10 million poured into our district from Trump donors in my primary election, which I understood it to be Trump making his promise of sending me back a reality, our district said, no, this is not going to happen. And our immigrants, first-time voters, working class people mobilized and hit the pavement, organize to make sure that we made history again by having one of the highest turnouts that our state has seen in a primary election in 50 years. Because here in the 5th, we understand what organizers across the country understand. That is, not only do we mobilize to protect those that are fighting for the policies that will make our lives better, but we also mobilize around issues so that we can have them be implemented. Minnesota is home to the base of labor. It's home to the mobilization of Black Lives Matter. It's home to people who recognize what it means to fight for a $15 minimum wage, to push back against policies when it comes to immigration. People who know when they heard last year, Send Her Back chants, that it was time for them to affirm their commitment to sending me back to Congress. Because here in Minnesota, we know we don't only just welcome immigrants, but we send them to Washington. So in this election cycle, what is at stake for us is very clear for me. It's very personal because I believe politics is personal. For me, it's about fighting against an administration that has really made us feel insulted and assaulted at every single turn. It's about undoing a stain to our country from a president that really doesn't respect our Constitution, doesn't respect the people in this country, and doesn't respect the office of the White House. It's about fighting to make sure we put someone in office that will be responsive to the policies that will create a better tomorrow for all of us. Jennifer said something earlier that really is the reason why I am choosing to fight to make sure we have a President Biden in office. That is because in the last 3.5 years, we had the choice of whether we would get a president we could push to get Medicare for all, housing for all, a Green New Deal, a just immigration, or having a president where we are every single day faced with the reality of protecting the things that are fundamentally important to us and the expansion of just the basics. And so for me and for many people across this country, this is our time. This is our time to make sure that we fight for a more just society. Because it is no longer enough for us to pour out into the streets and chant Black Lives Matter, to pour out to the streets and to say all are welcome, to pour out to the streets and say healthcare is a human right, to pour out to the streets and say housing is a human right. This is the time for us to make sure those cries in the streets are translated into legislation, and that we get people into the White House who we can push to recognize that a Green New Deal is a racial equity policy, that healthcare for all is a racial equity policy, that housing for all is racial equity policy, and just immigration is a racial equity policy. And so I am inviting my fellow organizers, my fellow activists, my fellow agitators to hit the pavement, to organize your neighbors, your family, your community, because this election cycle will dictate the kind of policies we can have in the next 4 years. And I am ready. I am ready not only to throw down in Congress, but to have a partner in the White House who we get the opportunity to push and not just defend the things that matter to us. So thank you all for energizing us. Thank you all for speaking with so much passion about the things that are at stake. Thank you all for the recognition that this 2020 election needs to be fundamentally different than the 2016 election. The difference is going to be with us making phone calls, texting our friends and family, knocking on doors safely, of course, and having the biggest turnouts in every single district, just like we did here in the 5th in our primary election. Because we do get the opportunity not to only have progressive champions in the House, but to win back the Senate and have President Biden and Vice President Harris, so that we can continue to mobilize ourselves to make sure a progressive agenda is more realistic and one that we can envision. So again, thank you all for everything that you have done to make sure we were successful and everything that you will do to make sure that our country is successful and that not only do we beat Trump, but we position ourselves in having one of the most successful presidential cycles for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party.